With Donald Trump back in the White House, government and business leaders in Europe are preparing for what a second Trump term will mean for the European economy and security and climate initiatives. Deutsche Welle correspondent Emily Leshner joins us now from Berlin. Emily, g'day. So Donald Trump has signed dozens of executive orders since taking office. What's been the reaction from the EU?
Yes, he's certainly wasted no time in following through on some of his campaign promises, like pulling the U.S. out of the Paris climate agreement. So there is a real fear and a sense that he might go ahead with some of the other promises he made, and some of which would have a very direct, immediate impact on Europe. One of these is his promise of increasing tariffs from 10 to 20% on goods coming from the EU. Now, for the German car industry, for example, this would be pretty devastating. The auto sector here is already struggling because of high labor costs and energy costs, and as well as competition from China. It's already teetering on the edge of survival. It's unclear if it's going to survive another blow. But the fear that Trump will follow through has also had a really interesting effect on EU leaders in the past couple of days since he's taken office. There have been several of these leaders who are calling for reform across the EU. Both the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos, saying that now was the time for Europe to come together, to reinvest, to reform, a pretty positive outlook on its ability to shape things in the next 4 years and be a positive influence on the rest of the world. Scholz is traveling to France today to meet with President Macron and to help to start to chart this new path. So lots of discussion and mention of reform and an air of we can do this.
And so the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum has kicked off in Davos in Switzerland, as you mentioned, and President Trump has been a topic of discussion there.
Yes, definitely. I mean, he's been central to many of the discussions there, even if he's not going to be making any in-person appearances. As I mentioned, Scholz and von der Leyen were at the meeting when they gave those speeches, and there were also delegates who gathered at the Ukraine House to watch the inauguration. And what's really interesting here is that you could see in the inauguration, you could see a succession of 4 billionaires in the front row watching the inauguration happen. That was Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Google's Sundar Pichai, and X's Elon Musk. And it was an almost too perfect visual representation of another big topic at the summit, which is the ever widening wealth gap and the grip on power that's held by a small group of people. And this was a topic there because Oxfam International had time to release of a report pointing out that the top 10 billionaires in the world are making on average $100 million a day, while 44% of the world's population is living on less than $7 a day. So as some of the most influential and wealthiest people in the world are gathering in Davos to make decisions on things like creating a regulatory environment around the AI industry, for example, we're also witnessing 4 tech barons, with an enormous concentration of power at the swearing in of one of the most powerful leaders in the world. And it's just a stark reminder of how the ultra wealthy are able to sway policy decisions that are beneficial to their businesses and their personal wealth.
So what happens next in the EU-Donald Trump relationship? Can EU leaders do more than just react to Donald Trump?
I mean, to some extent, they do have to wait around to plan a reaction. Tariffs on EU goods, though, for example, one of Trump's campaign promises would also hurt the U.S. economy and raise prices for consumers there. So it's still a question as to whether Trump is actually going to go through with them. But if he does make good on this promise, for example, it could incentivize European companies to move operations outside of the bloc. So in this way, EU leaders can start setting the stage, one that is advantageous for companies to keep conducting business in Europe. And this is something that Ursula von der Leyen said the Commission would be planning. She mentioned that there would be proposals soon that would help do things like bring down energy prices, which again is going to be hard if she wants to increase imports of expensive LNG from the U.S. But she also mentioned there'd be proposals for increasing domestic investment, creating a single market to make things easier for European investment, cutting down red tape for small-sized companies. So there are things that the EU can start to lay the groundwork for now. But again, these are promises that the EU has also made in the past, independent of a Trump term. So it remains to be seen if Europe will be able to make good on their promises. But there is certainly a sense of a we can do this attitude. And so there are things that the EU can do now, but there will also need to be a little bit of wait and see for what Trump does next.
Okay, Emily Leshner there in Berlin. Time now for finance. Here's David Chow.